Here we go. Are we ready, Joe?
Go ahead, Mr.
Okay.
Yes.
On behalf of the Monmouth University Board of Trustees, faculty, administrators, and students, welcome to Monmouth University and historic Wilson Hall. In addition to Monmouth University Board of Trustees member Chris Maher, who is one of our panelists, we also have fellow board member Leslie Hitchner, right there, and our board chair, Michael Plodwick, and his wife, Linda, are here in the audience. Additionally, we have Monmouth County Freeholder Gary Scharfenberger and the Monmouth County Sheriff, Sean Golden. So thank you all for coming with and being with us today. This is the third of a series of 4 panel discussions with this year's public servant in residence, former State Senator Joe Kyrillos. The first 2 have been insightful discussions on pension and benefit reform, as well as bridging the partisan divide. I anticipate today's discussion to be equally as interesting. The goal of the Public Servant in Residence program is to introduce students to leaders in public service and to assist students in examining important public issues. The university has a public mission, and it's programs like this one that connects the students to the world outside while adding to the general welfare of the community. Senator Kyrillos has put together an all-star panel. Today's panelists have a deep practical knowledge of how the economy works, and it will be interesting to hear their perspectives as to what are the most pressing issues that New Jersey should address to provide a competitive edge in the national and global economy. To moderate this program this morning, we are fortunate to have Senator Joe Kyrillos. Joe spent a good deal of his time in the state legislature devoted to improving New Jersey's economy and business environment. When his party was in the majority, Joe served as majority conference leader and chaired a standing committee on economic development. He was the original sponsor of the state's landmark Business Employment Incentive Program, and his efforts led to the success of the state's Business Action Center and Jobs for Jersey program, which created thousands of new private sector jobs. He's also here today with his lovely wife, Susan, who is a former coworker of mine, and if I did not mention her, then I would be in big trouble. Since I will be unable to attend the last panel discussion on April 5th, I want to publicly thank Joe for being with us this year and providing such value to our students and the regional community. I look forward to hearing from the panelists on today's topics of discussion, an important one for the state of New Jersey. Please welcome Monmouth University's 2018-2019 Public Servant in Residence, Senator Joseph Kyrillos.
Mr. President, thank you very much. Ray, I was worried about you for a second there. We had a crisis, economic crisis. Great, thanks. We're going to miss you on April 5 for the 4th and final seminar. So let me just thank you right now for a great year and a great opportunity. I've enjoyed it quite a bit, and it's good to see so many people here, students and trustees and people from the community. I want to thank my all-star panel, as the president has noted, for their time today. Our morning is entitled Jobs, the Economy, and Global Competition, New Jersey and the overarching macro economy. We're going to hear from some real experts. First, we have some students here. Those students that are here, let me just take a show of hands. Who's from New Jersey of the group? Mostly, right? I know when we were here back in the fall, we had a large group. We were talking about a New Jersey subject matter, and we wanted to know exactly who we were talking to. So this is going to be very, very relevant for you and for all of us, and for those kids who may be here from from neighboring states because we might want you to stay in New Jersey. And you're here now. You know, I have two words when I think about the state's economy. It could be one of two choices: what happened and what's happening. When I started a long time ago, as the president has noted, I started pretty young, which means I'm really old now. Back in the late 80s, our state was an economic leader. Today we have some attributes, which we'll talk about, some real positives about New Jersey, but some glaring weaknesses that hurt our competitiveness vis-a-vis our neighbors, the nation, and the world. In 1988, our unemployment rate was just under 4%. The national rate was well over 5%. We're going to let Ryo talk about the numbers in a little bit. I won't get into too many statistics, but that's a 28% difference, us doing better than the country. We were the undisputed medicine chest of the nation, the leading pharmaceutical state with U.S. headquarters for domestic companies, European pharmaceutical companies headquartered right here, Bell Labs here in Homedale and throughout the state of New Jersey, other telecommunications firms, Fort Monmouth, and other technology companies. They all followed New Jersey's really rich tradition of Thomas Edison and his West Orange labs that invented so much of what the world needed, and they did it right here at home. Back then, 64% of our people were employed. Today, it's not quite 60% of eligible people. That's a 4+% difference. That's a big chunk of our population. What that means for all of us in a personal way, it's hundreds of thousands of our neighbors, family members, relatives, friends that may want to work not working. And we've stayed at that level since the big recession, the Great Recession, which I'm sure we'll talk more about of 2007-8. And New Jersey, unfortunately, has been slower to recover those jobs since the recession, and only recently has reached pre-recession job levels. Another big indicator, which I talk a lot about, and a lot of people don't want to acknowledge, but it's very true, is that we're losing wealth to other places. From 2015 to 16, that's the most recent data available, New Jersey ranked third in the nation in gross income lost. $11 billion of money leaving the state for other places. We gained some, but a net loss of $3.5 billion. Only New York State and Illinois were worse. So what does that mean? That means people leaving New Jersey for Florida, for North Carolina, for South Carolina, for other places. So these indicators don't paint a pretty picture. What happened? Well, we have a good idea when the Tax Foundation ranks our state, unfortunately, the worst in the country in business climate. Our property taxes, our income taxes, our corporate taxes, the worst 5 in America. It's the third highest combination of state and local tax burden as a percentage of income in the country. So those stats were already bad, and unfortunately, in recent times, we've raised more taxes, making it harder for businesses, corporate taxes, income taxes. Just a couple of days ago, my friend, the governor, who I like a lot, talked about another tax, which I think hurts us, putting a cap on incentives, economic incentives, which we'll talk about, especially with Joe Taylor when he speaks. If we had a cap back when we recruited or re-recruited Panasonic to stay in New Jersey, we might not have had him here, so we needed to keep Panasonic here. So we're not alone. Governor Cuomo has said as much very recently. Just a couple of weeks ago, I noted he talked about the stresses on New York State that have been exacerbated by some of the federal tax changes, people leaving New York as they're leaving New Jersey. And listen, New Jersey is not an island, right? And New York's not an island. What happens in Trenton and Albany is not the be-all and end-all. We are affected by national policies, by global economic trends, by politics, by war, by terror. There's a lot that has brought us to this state. And since I talked about the late 80s, lots have happened since then that has nothing to do with state government. The internet may have been invented, but not for most of us. Other technology changes, all of that makes a big difference too. We will always be an expensive state, like other older states, other diverse states, other very densely populated states. I don't expect New Jersey to be a leader, and we don't have to. But there are other high-cost states that are doing well, they're doing better, and we don't have to be at the bottom. And listen, make no mistake about it. For those of you that are going to graduate soon, we're still a great state. We're still a great place to be, despite our challenges. And we've got a lot of great assets, which I alluded to at the outset. A great, an educated and sophisticated workforce, a great strategic location, a great and very high quality of life, which is why most of us choose to live here. So we want to build on those attributes, build on those successes, and that's what I think we want to talk about. We want to talk about today. So, where do we go from here? What does the future hold for the national economy? Royo's going to put some things in perspective, I think, for us, for our state economy. Is innovation what will lead our New Jersey economy? What can federal and state lawmakers do to help things along? Am I right or not right that high taxes really hurt the economy in the way that I think? Does New Jersey's aggressive regulatory standard hurt the economy? Most importantly, I want to get a sense of what finding a job will be like for the great Monmouth University students that we have here today. So I look forward to hearing from these three great panelists, each of them individually, and then opening this up to some questions and answers from all of you. So first, I want to start off. We're gonna go to Joe Taylor last, the retired CEO of Panasonic North America. Chris Maher will follow Royo. He's the chairman and CEO of OceanFirst Bank. But first, Ryotaro Tashiro, his job is to understand the regional economy. And he's a great complement to the impressive business people on the panel. Roy is the regional economic advisor for the Federal Reserve Bank of Philadelphia. He's responsible for conducting research on current economic issues in the Federal Reserve's 3rd District, which I think includes half of New Jersey, southern New Jersey. He speaks to key audiences like this around the region. Prior to joining the Fed, Royo was a business analyst for Bloomberg. So Royo, thank you for being here. Welcome once again to New Jersey. And maybe just begin by giving a quick explanation for some of the students we have today on what the Federal Reserve does, what the Federal Reserve system is all about.
Sure.
Thank you very much.
Sure. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me here. Thank you, Joe, for that great introduction. Is there a clicker for my on the podium?
You have a clicker right here.
Oh.
And if you prefer to come to the podium.
Is that okay? Might be
that's
easier.
absolutely fine.
Sorry, I didn't mean to keep you up on the
That's
podium.
fine. You're on.
That would be great. Yes. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for having me here. Thank you, Joe, for that great introduction. So before I can get started, my public speaking coach always tells me that I need to start a good presentation with a joke. Unfortunately, we economists at the Federal Reserve Bank of Philadelphia always have to start with a disclaimer. So here it is. The views expressed this morning are my own. So please don't sue me if I say anything stupid in the next 8 minutes or so. Okay, so with that out of the way, let me actually just give you the punchline first. So I'm going to be talking about the national economy for a bit, and then I'll move on to the state economy. And really, the punchline is that, yes, I think the economy is likely to be slower than in 2019 than what we saw in 2018. But I still think that our economy is still pretty strong, pretty solid, and that is really supported by the fact that we've been having a very, very solid labor market, both nationally and at the state level. And despite some perceived weaknesses that you may hear in the news these days. So what are some of the risks? And of course, we do have to recognize that there are some downside risks that are growing pretty rapidly in 2019 that we didn't see in 2018. So we have to watch out for those. So these risks are, one, uncertainty over policy, domestic policy coming out of from Washington, D.C., especially in the trade front. And then the next one would be tighter labor market in my mind. I think that now that we are entering a very tight labor market with low unemployment rate, the question is, how do we find people to work so that our economy can keep growing? And then also we are, starting to see some evidence of that, not just in this country, but all across the globe, especially in the industrialized nations, that we're seeing some evidence of slowdown in global economy. So let me concentrate on the two things today, growth and employment market. So first on the growth end, right? So if you look at the GDP growth rate for the past 10 years or so, our economy has been growing pretty steadily. As a matter of fact, I don't know if you've heard this, but by how things are going, by the summer, by June of 2019, this year, we will be in the longest expansion period that this country has ever had, or in modern economic history. And by modern economic history, I mean since the 1850s or so. So we are living in a pretty good world with long economic growth. However, some people may not feel it, and I think that's one of the reasons why we may be feeling a little too uncomfortable with how things may go down the road in 2019. So as you can see, 2018, we grew at a little bit less than 3%. So the quarter 4 number is 2.6%, but if you do the annual average of 2018, it's about 2.9%. So not quite 3%, but we did a lot better than 2017 when we grew at 2.3%. Going forward, you can look at any of the forecasting models out there. The example that I have here is the Survey of Professional Forecasters. So basically, this is just a quarterly survey of professional economists giving us their opinion on where they think we are going to be. We're going to be at the end of the next 4 quarters or so. And I think majority of economists, including myself, tend to agree that for the next 4 quarters or so, the national economy will keep growing, first of all, but not as fast as we did in 2018. So I think the bottom line here is that 2019, majority of economists believe that will be a little bit worse than 2018, but still better than what we saw in 16 and 17. So that's really the gist of the topic here. If you look at the private market seems to be a little less optimistic than economists, as they always are. So this is the implied probability of a rate cut from the Federal Reserve Open Market Committee. And if you look at the right-hand column, this is the probability of a rate cut. And what this shows you is that this is basically the market participants making a bet on when they think the next rate cut is going to be from the FOMC. And if you think about what rate cut is, these rates don't get cut unless they see some kind of major risking in the economy, namely recession, possible recession coming. So the fact that the market, almost 6% of the market, believes that they might be a possible rate cut by December worries me a bit. So this is a non-significant amount of the market believing that there might be some enough bad news coming from the economy that we may actually have to end up cutting rates by the end of the year. So I think this is a pretty important indicator in 2019. So I started talking about some of the risks. Let me just go through one of them. So I talked about the general slowdown in global economy. We are starting to see some evidence of that in most of our trading partners. If you look at, say, China, one of our biggest trading partners, which is the top line, orange line there, you do see a constant decline in their growth rates. Another big trading partner, also my background, Japan, which is in the gray line. I don't know if you can see that, but Japan went negative 2.5% last quarter. So again, it does look like if you look at outside of this country, we are starting to see some slowdown in the growth. And since we are such a globalized economy, I don't think we can ignore the fact that other countries are not doing so well. So that could come back and affect us in 2019. So these are all national and global data. Let me just move on to talk about some of the local data. So unfortunately, we don't have, we don't collect data specifically on New Jersey, but we do collect data on our 3rd district, which, as Joe mentioned, does include the lower half of New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and also state of Delaware. So every month, we actually call up some business owners around their district and ask them a bunch of questions. And the first question of the survey is actually very important. So we ask them, tell us, compared to last month, did your business do better, worse, or about the same? And the results are in front of you. It's presented in terms of diffusion index. And for those of you who don't know what that is, it's just basically percentage of people who said yes to that question minus who said no to that question. So basically, the positive diffusion index means that majority of people thought that their business did better than the previous month. And the blue line is the non-manufacturing service sectors, and the orange line is manufacturing sector. So 2 things that I want to point out. So the first thing I will point out is that if you look at both the blue and the orange lines, it does seem like the overall sentiment among our business owners around our district were pretty positive throughout 2018, except for the last 2 months, right? So you do see that, especially the blue line has been pretty high for most of 2018. However, we did see a very, very sharp decline in their sentiment, in the assessment of the economy towards the end of 2018. The blue line actually went negative for the first time since 2011. And as you can see, the latest number for the orange line, which is the manufacturing sector, is actually negative for the first time in 2016. So it does seem like while the overall economy, the GDP economy, numbers like GDP and labor market numbers are showing some positive trends, we do have to recognize that business owners around their district are feeling pretty uneasy about where the economy might be headed for the next 6 months or so. One of the reasons that's often quoted in terms of the source of concern is the potential effects from the trade war. So let me just spend the next few minutes talking about that. So as it turns out, New Jersey does do a lot of trade with our trading partners. So it's the middle part. So if you add up all the dollar value of all the exports that went from New Jersey to these 4 countries, that amounts to be a little bit over $2 billion. So overall, it's definitely a non-significant number. It represents about 0.5% of our state's economy. But as you can see from the chart, it does seem like New Jersey's economy could be affected, at least this much, from the potential trade war. And another thing I should add is that not everyone is going to be affected the same way, right? So it depends on what you sell as a company. So depending on what you sell, the effect that you may be seeing is very different. So just as an interesting exercise, here's a list of top mostly affected products from New Jersey to these 4 countries. So, for example, we sell a lot of chemicals to Canada, so herbicides and fungicides. You can see that together we sold about $200 million worth of that. I had no idea about this, but we apparently sell a bunch of orange juice to Canadians. About $150 million worth of that. So all of that is going to be taxed at a higher rate when we export those products. Another important item is various makeup products to EU. So that's also going to be affected. So again, like I said, when you see these numbers, it does look like the numbers are everywhere. So depending on what people sell or the companies sell, the effects from the trade war could vary pretty widely. So let me actually spend the next 5 minutes talking about the employment market. So as I said in the beginning, I think the employment market in this country has been pretty solid, and that really goes the same with the New Jersey. So overall, employment growth in this country was about 2.5%. So New Jersey's number is not, as high as the national level, but as you can see, we've actually had a pretty positive job growth rate in the past 12 months or so. And this story is actually true for most states in this country. The only exceptions are, Alaska and Vermont, which they had, slightly negative job growth. So what are these jobs? So I thought it was an interesting exercise to think about the long-term evolution of where our jobs are coming from. So this is just really the share of employment by sector, and this is for New Jersey. But if you look at the U.S., it looks almost exactly the same. So I think 2 things really stand out in my mind. So one is that red line there. So the red line is the manufacturing sector. So 30 years ago, back in 1990, manufacturing sector accounted for about 18% of our labor force in New Jersey. So that was actually the second highest share. Fast forward 30 years, manufacturing sector actually accounts for less than 8% of our labor force, which shows a clear decline. However, the second point that I wanted to make is that as we saw a decline in the manufacturing sector in terms of employment share, we did see a pretty rapid growth in terms of the service providing sector. So I'm talking about specifically the pink and the green lines. So the pink line is the professional and business service sector. So these are your lawyers, your accountants, your engineers, and then the green line is the education and health service sector. So hospitals, universities, things like that. So as we saw a sharp decline in manufacturing sector, it does look like we have successfully we're able to shift our focus from manufacturing sort of goods providing sector into service providing sector as a state. Another important statistics to talk about employment market is the unemployment rate. As Joe was telling us, a minute ago, our unemployment rate has been, pretty low. So the overall national rate is about 4.0%. The state, number is very similar. And as you can see from this, we actually went from well above 9%, back in 2010, and so that's, that number has actually sharply declined. And my projection is that this is going to continue at least for the next 6-8 months or so. Of course, if you talk about local unemployment, one thing that we do have to recognize is that although we have, very low unemployment overall as a state, of course there are pockets in New Jersey where they are still struggling, especially the states, especially the counties that we cover in the Philly Fed, the southern counties of New Jersey. So especially you see the dark purple county, that's Cape May County, which went from well above 15% unemployment rate to about 7.5% as of last month. So, we do see communities still struggling, but I think what's important for us to realize is that these communities are actually recovering rather quickly. Like I said, for another example is Atlantic County. So Atlantic County's unemployment rate went from about 8% last year to less than 7% as of last month. So we are seeing some strong labor force. I think I think what we should be focusing is that not just the number that you see here, but really the direction that we're going. And I do think that at least for the labor market portion, our economy is doing quite well. I know my time is already up, but before I move on, let me just end with this particular graph, which shows a very good snapshot of what might be happening with the labor market right now. So this is one of my favorite graphs to show because I think it has a very good story. So, let me explain some of the lines here. So the red line is the layoffs rate. So this is basically the share of people getting fired. So for obvious reasons, we want to live in an economy where fewer people get fired. So the fact that this number is low and remaining low is very good news. Another good news is that the yellow line, the quits rate, has been rising pretty steadily. So this is basically the termination of labor that's initiated by the employee and not by the employer. So if you think about your own experience, people don't necessarily quit their current job unless they are confident that they'll get something else, pretty soon. So the fact that this yellow line is increasing it's actually very good news for us. The most important thing, I think, I can't stress this enough, is the difference between the blue and the green line. So if you look at the blue lines, that's the openings rate, and the green line is the hires rate. So if you look at the difference, there's a huge difference between the blue and the green line, right? So think about that for a minute. So that means that there are actually more jobs available in this country for people to get hired, and then there are a number of people getting hired. So we are entering this very, very tight labor market. So tight, in fact, that it looks like businesses are really struggling to find workers. Another related statistics is that 4.7% is corresponds to about 6.7 million open jobs. Right now in this country, we have about 6.3 million unemployed people. So even if all those 6.3 million unemployed people got jobs, all of them, we still have some leftovers in terms of openings. So that we do live in a pretty interesting state of the economy. So with that, here's a really quick recap of what I talked about. But thank you very much for having me here again, and I really look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Okay, Roya, thank you very much. Slightly more upbeat snapshot of things than my preview. So Chris Maher is in a great place to talk about our economy and the future for many of our students here today and for others. What's more vital and knowledgeable of the inner workings of the economy than a bank? He's chairman, president, and CEO of OceanFirst Financial Corporation and OceanFirst Bank, New Jersey's fourth largest state bank. He serves as a member of the Monmouth University board, as I think the president noted, was elected treasurer of the board with more than 25 years of experience in financial services and related industries. Chris's banking career is diverse and included responsibilities in retail banking, consumer lending, and insurance services. He joined OceanFirst in 2013 as president and the chief operating officer. He became the CEO and then the chairman of the board. It's a great bank with operational headquarters here in Red Bank, Monmouth County. Full disclosure, I'm proud to be a member of the bank's advisory board, though the way the bank has been going, the chairman doesn't need very much advice. Ladies and gentlemen, Chris Maher.
All right, thanks, Joe. Just a time check here, about 10 minutes or so, does that make sense? All right, so glad to be with you this morning. Just a show of hands from the students here. How many are hoping to enter the job market this spring or this summer? All right, so hopefully we'll give you some sense as to what you have facing you. I think that from Rio's presentation, it's pretty good news. I also will say is, Rio gets that opportunity to open up and say that his views are his own and not the views of the Federal Reserve System. I'll say my views are my own too, and they may not necessarily even be right, but I'll share what we can. What I'm going to try and do is knit together and follow some of the themes that Rio presented and give you the perspective that we hear from our clients. So as Joe mentioned, we're one of the larger banks headquartered here in New Jersey, actually the second largest commercial bank, so we do a lot of commercial transactions. We have several $1 billion worth of treasury services deposits throughout the state, so we get to see a lot of that flow of money going in and out. And each year, the commercial customers we have who borrow from us go through an annual process of we review where their businesses are, and that gives us some sense. And then I'm fortunate to serve on the Philadelphia Federal Reserve's Advisory Board, and through that had the opportunity to join the advisory board for the Federal Reserve Board of Governors in Washington, and I'll try and bring some of that back as well. So the first thing about the economy in a broad brush, both nationally and at a statewide level, is it's pretty good. So I think the main question that we get from our clients is, okay, so what's next and what's coming down the road? That's always really hard to tell because forward-looking indicators are hard to find, right? If it was easy to tell what was coming, I think we'd have a lot less uncertainty and a lot more growth opportunity. In terms of the short-term data, I will say that across the board, employment's very good, FICO scores are very good, delinquencies are very low. It's going to be very difficult, though, to spot when this turns. And the reason I'll say that is we're at an absolute level where these indicators are as low as they've ever been measured. So you may have read recently that credit card delinquencies were up. Auto delinquencies tend to move, kind of bounce around a little bit. Those are good insight into where the economy is going. But they're, think about signal noise, where at a very low level, you may see them move. It doesn't necessarily indicate a pattern, but I think we have somewhere along the lines of $900 billion worth of credit card debt in the country. So if that starts to get off base, that could be a much bigger issue. So what I would think about is the economy is kind of bumping along. Jobs seem pretty good. Jobs underpin things like delinquencies and the housing market and car purchases. So then what's likely to come and maybe cause an issue? The first thing is that most regular issues take a while to play out, and you will see them. You'll see employment weaken, you'll see delinquencies rise, and that'll be kind of a slow, kind of traditional recession. Even when there are domestic events that would cause a recession, they're usually not, they don't widely impact the economy. So for those students here, maybe you'd have to look at this in your history classes, but if you go back to the 90s, there was a crisis around long-term capital, a famous kind of crisis where we had a major financial institution go sideways. We had the dot-com bust following that. We had an Enron issue. We had, obviously, the 9/11 attacks. And those things did cause issues in the economy, but they were not pervasive, right? So these are things that could happen. It would be very hard to tell when that next issue is, but they're unlikely to drag the economy sideways. What we should think about, though, and to bring this more locally, is what are the things that might impact the New Jersey economy? Where can we play to our strengths, and what should we be aware of? So there are two sectors I would draw your attention to, which are probably pretty obvious. But the first is healthcare. And healthcare, we'll probably go on for hours about the healthcare structure in our country. But I would share this economically. Healthcare requires very significant capital investments, right? In plant and equipment, you're building buildings, you're educating people. It takes years to produce a nurse, a doctor. Those investments are substantial. The way that we pay for healthcare over the long term ultimately determines how we allocate all that capital. Do you build a hospital or a surgery center or a rehab center? And right now, we've got this unsettled discussion over these major payment streams in healthcare. And then to go to Rio's slides, although we're not necessarily the healthcare provider we may once have been with pharma, it's still a very important industry for New Jersey. So when we think about, I have the opportunity to serve on the Hackensack Meridian Hospitals Corporation Board. And so the employment in that system is about 38,000 individuals, right? So that if the state or the federal government changes the way those payments come, even if it's the right change or a good change, the change will direct economic activity that may or may not reflect where we've been making our capital investments. And I think we've got to be very thoughtful and very careful about updating the way those look and to be thinking about what happens to our economy if we make a dramatic shift to the way healthcare is handled. So healthcare is something to absolutely watch. The second one is the transportation economy. So I'm sure everyone here has probably been ordering stuff off Amazon. We're very fortunate by our geography. So despite the issues we face, and taxation is certainly a significant one, we have one of the most vital ports in the East Coast here in Newark. It's been deepened. For those of you that follow that, they had to expand the Panama Canal so you could fit bigger cargo ships from China. Those ships can now get through the canal. Those Panamax ships are bigger. They need to get into the ports. We have the deepest port because we spent years blasting it. If you spend time anywhere up near the port, it looks dramatically different than 5 years ago. If you just look at the number of containers building up, the number of warehouses and all that. So the good news is that for a transportation economy, which is going to be a lot of the growth over the next few years, we're in a great position. About 10% of the US population is within a 2-hour drive of where we're standing, or where you're sitting. So the opportunity to control that commerce and that kind of Amazon transportation economy is terrific. But it has a downside as well. As we focus around transportation and the related economic activity, we have a fundamental change in autonomous vehicle technology. And I know it feels like Star Trek stuff, and you look at things and you see a car here or there, especially in places like California and Phoenix where they're testing all of these cars. We have today in a country about 7 million jobs that relate to driving a vehicle. Taxis, trucks, those sorts of things. They are high-wage jobs, relatively speaking, especially considering the educational level required to do those jobs. So the average pay in that sector is well into the $70,000 a year range. So think about 7 million jobs, all of which may not be needed in 5 or 10 years. That's a very significant dislocation of economic activity. The second thing is the very fundamental way that we move things around, the way we warehouse, the way you park your cars, the way you own a car shares. All of those things are fundamental changes that you can absolutely are going to expect will impact us over the next 10 years. So as we think about the local economy, we need to be very sensitive to where is healthcare going, where are the capital investments regarding healthcare. It's one of the largest employers in the state. Where does the transportation economy go, and how does that impact kind of the value system in New Jersey, right? Being here in a geography and having the jobs tied to that. As we get into questions later, I'm happy to take, we've got a number of clients in both of those industries, and I've got some very interesting stories about where we are in capacity, but I would say this, we are at full capacity in most of those industries right now. You cannot find a truck driver, you cannot find warehouse space, and that's actually limiting, I think, our potential to expand the economy. I also do want to turn and just say, look, if you think about the global economy and how that might impact the local economy, how would that tie here, right? How would that impact us? And I would just focus on a couple things. First is, I'm going to be overly simplistic given the time. You have Asia, Europe, and the US. So we talked about the US a lot. Rio mentioned particularly Asia, but we'll talk about Asia and Europe. So what's going on in Asia? China, the biggest player there, but not the only player. Certainly Japan's second to them. It is very difficult to understand what's really happening in the Chinese economy. So there is data coming out of it, but it's not the kind of data we would get out of our economy. So you have playing out over the next couple of years a slower growth rate. You have very high debt levels in China, so especially among local governments. So that if you went back and did this number, how much debt do they have to take on to increase GDP by $1? It is a much higher percentage today. It's approaching 1-to-1. That's a very inefficient outlay. And for those of you, any history students here? Okay, we have one. Okay, but it is the president, so I guess that's good enough. So I would go back, I would turn you to go back and look at the economic history of the USSR. Not Russia, the USSR. That economy grew quite well, as many developing economies grow in the early stages. So for 20 years, they grew at enormous rates. So the transition from a controlled economy to a market economy can allow for very high growth rates for a long period of time. Those finer tuning market forces, though, that come in later in the cycle can be very disruptive. And if you think about, it doesn't even have to be a recession in China, it's a slowing of the growth rate. It's also difficult to understand how that will play out politically in China. A slow-growing China causes a variety of social pressures. And as we went through as a country, if you think about the unemployment system, the social security system, the Medicare system, these are safety nets that we had to build as an economy to deal with things like recessions and depressions. So what comes out of China is going to be very difficult to, first of all, predict. And then second of all, even if you can predict it, predicting the outcomes of it is really, really difficult. That bleeds into Europe. Okay, so in Europe, you have the largest economy in Europe is Germany. Germany and China share something. They are export-driven economies. The US is not an export-driven economy. So you have Germany's largest trading partner, China. If China's weak, Germany's weak. If China's weak and Germany's weak, Germany's about 20% of the EU in economic activity. So that drives what's going to happen in the rest of the EU, countries like Spain and Italy and all of that. So you have a weakening Asian economy, which is driving a weakening European economy. So you have now Germany is actually flirting with perhaps going into their own recession. If Germany goes into recession, Europe will follow. And then just to be even more, some more positive thoughts for you. What's the second largest economy in the EU? Great Britain. So now you have Brexit, right? It's about 16% of the EU economy, and you have a tremendous uncertainty about Brexit and how it'll all play out. So if you think about the global set of challenges, we're probably looking at slow growth for a period of time. We're probably looking at keeping an eye out for events, both geopolitically, but then at home around healthcare, around transportation. That all kind of knits together to 2019 is probably going to be pretty good. We would have data today that would show us the economy sliding. It's not. If it's not sliding yet, there's a decent chance 2020 is okay. But time is your enemy. And what I mean by that is that there's always a probability of something happening. Geopolitically, one of these sector issues, and the more time that goes on, the more likely something happens. And then if these things happen, it's very difficult to understand or to gauge how significant those things will be. So there's all very good reasons to be optimistic today about the job market, the economy. There is no threat looming that looks like it would derail things, but there'll be a gradual slowing. And I would just keep your eyes out and keep focused and watch events happening in the industries that matter for us, like healthcare and transportation. And keep a sharp eye, and I think this is one of the things Americans could do a little better, right? Keep a sharp eye on what's happening in the world around us, what's happening in China, what's happening in Europe, and how those things are connected to the markets right here. So that's kind of my overview. Thank you, Joe.
Chris Maher, thank you very much for your insights. Okay, next up is Joe Taylor. Joe is in an excellent position to discuss the economy, New Jersey's innovation ecosystem for his technology company, and the vital role that tax incentives play in New Jersey and played for Panasonic. He served as chairman and CEO of Panasonic North America for 7 years, retired just I guess a little over a year ago after a nearly 34-year career, heading up the American subsidiary for Panasonic. He was the first American executive officer and managing executive officer of Panasonic Corporation, and the first non-Japanese executive to serve as chairman and CEO of Panasonic North America. When I was a kid, and even when I was college-aged, Panasonic made all the great tape recorders that I got. If you had a Panasonic TV, you had a really, really good TV. Well, this is the guy that changed all that, I think. Joe led the company's business transformation, shifting its focus from products to business and business to government solutions. He led the company's growth each year of his tenure, and as I've noted, he put together a very successful public-private partnership which kept Panasonic in New Jersey, and he had many, many options. So, Joe Taylor, thank you very much for being with us.
Joe, when you said I'm in a good position to discuss this, you mean because I'm retired, I have time to read now? Or? When I walked in this morning, Joe said to me, "What's the deal with the jeans and the tie?" And I said, "You know, I'm semi-retired, Joe. Today wasn't even a normal shave day for me, but I did it." So I don't want to go over a lot of what I wanted to kind of give you an overview on. Joe and Ryo and Chris already covered, but I'll give you some snapshots and some of my comments on the overviews. Yes, I agree also, U.S. economy is in pretty good shape. Stock market's strong, it's volatile, we're not quite sure why it's as crazy as it is, but it's doing well. GDP's as Ryos had said, is doing well. Inflation seems to be under control. I want to make a comment. So unemployment is a very nice, attractive number, and I'll come back to it later. But that unemployment number doesn't show what's under the surface there. There's a tremendous amount of underemployment. That is, people that are overqualified for jobs that they're doing. And I think the biggest factor we need to take a look at is those 6 million jobs that are open and 6 million people looking for jobs. That shows a tight market. It also shows people aren't qualified for the openings that businesses are required. And I want to address that later, because I think that's a critical factor in where our economy is going to go. I think on the negative side, we did a pretty good job of covering that, but our trade deficit is at a record high. And I'm concerned about the political instability and uncertainty. Business, I think, can survive in any environment. When I listen to an economist and a banker, I expect them to be conservative. But business people tend to be opportunists, and we say we can manage anything as long as we know what the environment for that will be. And right now, we don't have a steady environment. We don't know from a global perspective, from a U.S. perspective, or even from a state perspective, what's the stability of taxes? What's the budget predictability? And more importantly, what will the policy decisions be that affect businesses? And as I worked for a foreign company, or we say international company, those factors are even more important. When we take a look at the New Jersey environment, Joe, you did a good job of kind of blasting us, and I want to reiterate some of those things. But one of the things that's most remarkable to me is in the midst of us recruiting Amazon, we raised taxes $1.5 billion. Most of that goes to corporations. What do we think Amazon's impression of that was? And in fact, Newark's bid was $2 billion better than New York's, and we weren't seriously considered. That's kind of a mindset that we're missing here. How do we encourage business? Did you know that poverty has grown faster in New Jersey than in 46 other states? That's a profound statistic. We rank consistently near the top for the poorest business tax climate, as Joe had mentioned. 45th worst in sales tax, 47th worst in corporate tax, 48th worst in property tax, 50th worst in personal income tax. And our overall average property taxes are the highest in the United States. That's the New Jersey environment that we're trying to encourage business to get in. So I skipped all my other stuff because you guys already covered it. And I'm an opportunist, so I'm going to make this positive at the end somehow. So then how does New Jersey recruit? What does New Jersey do? What the tax incentives meet? Who is Panasonic? So as Joe said, I spent 34 years with Panasonic. And you should know, while I was raised outside Philadelphia, we spent 35 or 36 years living in New Jersey, and I was born in Atlantic City. How many people do you know born in Atlantic City? Only Karen Francini is the only person I ever met born in Atlantic City. So we're a special breed of stubborn idiots. So Panasonic, as an executive at Panasonic, I was faced with a decision that many other executives are faced with, and many in New Jersey, and that is through the let me back up a second. If I ask what you think of when you hear Panasonic, I know Joe's comment is televisions. I'm assuming that's the general impression. And so that's true. Globally, Panasonic is still one of the world's largest manufacturers of electronics, home appliances, all of those kinds of things. But what you may not know about Panasonic is this transformation that we spoke of is much broader and much deeper than you could imagine. For instance, your refrigerator at home probably has a Panasonic compressor in it, probably has a Panasonic fan in it. Your cell phone, 30% of the components in that phone were manufactured by Panasonic. Your home computer or your tablet or your laptop, 40% of the components in that were made by Panasonic. If you flew on an airplane anytime in the last 15 years, that in-flight entertainment system that you looked at, not just the screen, but the system, the servers, the antennas in the plane, and the satellites in the air. They're made by Panasonic right here in the United States. Automotive business. Panasonic was the leader in the creation of what's now called the infotainment system. That was all done here in the United States. That infotainment system, at one point, we controlled 25% of the global market for car infotainment. Today, Panasonic's not only the leader in that technology, but when you talk about autonomous vehicles, cameras and sensors, Panasonic is one of the leading providers of components and technology and software for autonomous vehicles. And in fact, Panasonic currently is working with the Colorado Department of Transportation to create a national standard for vehicle-to-vehicle communication, which is essential for not just autonomous driving, but for driver safety overall. So those are probably things that you never thought of when you thought of your mom and dad's Panasonic TV. And that's the transformation that Joe was talking about. How did I take it from a 50% consumer company to a less than 10% consumer company while doubling revenue at the same time? It was a huge transformation. And so what that presented was a building that was, whose lease was up, where we had been for 40 years, that was no longer effective for what we needed to do. And in fact, through time, we had to change over much of the employee base for training and much more technology-based. So what do you do then? So I can tell you that the factors that I faced, I had 3 facilities in the United States, one in Chicago, one in Atlanta, that were underutilized, and we had just purchased Sanyo, another Japanese company. And they had a large headquarters in San Diego. San Diego. Did you step outside today? San Diego was where the other headquarters was. And I can tell you that my board, you can guess what the Japanese board preferred that we do. But fortunately, I worked for a company who has as a core belief what we call corporate social responsibility. Every company says it, but not every company really believes it. But our founder, it was a core belief of our founder 100 years ago. So I didn't have the same exact pressures that maybe some other CEOs have as it relates to their board. However, it's not an open blank check, so I did have to be fiscally responsible. And I can tell you from the initial conception of when we decided we could no longer stay where we were, Newark was not on the radar, and New Jersey definitely was not on the radar. But as we narrowed down, started narrowing down the selections, we had a governor at the time, you might remember him, Chris Christie. We had a mayor in Newark at the time, who you may remember, called Cory Booker, and we had the head of economic development, a remarkable woman who's passed away, Karen Franzini, who was just an outstanding person. They convinced me at least to take a look in New Jersey, and could we look in Newark? And as we studied Newark more and more, the inference or the feeling that we had was, here's a city who had really struggled for 40 years, since the mid to late 60s. And they were trying, and they were making progress. And they had a couple of corporate citizens. I'll say number one was Prudential, the most amazing corporate citizen I've ever been around. And so as I started talking to these executives, I had a feeling that Newark was on the cusp of something, and that government was going to do their best to be both hands-off and supportive of business. And you may not know this, but 55% of the employment that exists in Newark is not-for-profits. That's not a sustainable business model for any city. And the only thing that can save cities, in my personal opinion, is jobs. Doesn't matter how much funding you give it, if you can't create jobs in a city, you can't save the city. You can't create hope for kids to go to school. There's nothing there if there's no jobs. So there were 2 factors that entered into this. The first one is we had about 1,200 people at our headquarters. If we moved to San Diego or Atlanta or Chicago, we're not taking 1,000 or 1,200 people. We'll take a small fraction of that. So then what's the company's responsibility to your employees? And it's not just your employees, it's their families. And it's not just their families, it's the communities that they belong to. What's the impact that you have on that? The second factor is, what does true corporate social responsibility mean? And we felt that if a company like Panasonic made a $200 million commitment for a new building, and move their headquarters there over a long period of time, would that give other businesses confidence so that they could move to Newark as well? And in the end, I believe that both of those factors were significantly more important than the financial impact. So I've read about all these incentives, and I want to blow my brains out because either the press doesn't understand or they're not explaining well. But an incentive doesn't mean someone just wrote you a check for $10 billion. It doesn't work that way. An incentive only comes after a long agreement and both sides have completed what they said they were going to do. So in the case of Panasonic, even with the incentives, staying in Newark wasn't even close to being the best financial responsibility that I could have made. Wasn't even close. But despite what you may have read in the paper, if at the end of our 10-year term, the first 10 years, but we've already renewed the lease, that we've done everything we said we would do, we would have achieved about $100 million in tax incentives. After that tax incentive is calculated, the state of New Jersey and the city of Newark would be plus $223 million. Now that sounds like a pretty good deal for the state and the city to me, because it's no money out of their pocket, but that's not what you read. Another factor that I'd like to point out, and I'm going to tie into this, the city of Newark, and I'm not on the Chamber of Commerce, but the city of Newark has 55,000 college students in a city of 285,000 people. It's the highest per capita college ratio of any major city in the United States. The pool of labor is profound. Now, it doesn't feel like a college town, I grant you that. And there's many reasons for that. But that's all changing. There's low-income housing. Low income isn't the term I want to use. There's affordable housing coming. Students will be able to use this. The universities themselves are expanding through both internal university and through private partnerships. As the students move in, as businesses move in, housing will increase. Other places of businesses will be created. If you haven't been to Newark lately, I challenge you to tell me there hasn't been a difference. I don't say that Panasonic changed it, but I think if you ask anybody who's been in the city, we influenced it. And you're talking more and more, if you're in the downtown area, it's expanding, not only in corporate headquarters. M&M Mars is moving in there shortly. It's changed it. So that's the story of how we got to Newark. That's the story of tax incentives. But more than that, I want to talk about the global perspective. So this investment that Panasonic made in Newark, you may have heard, the big story I wanted to tell you about was Tesla batteries. Everybody's heard of the Gigafactory. But do you know who the battery guy is? Anybody? Take a guess. I'm standing up here. Take a guess. It's Panasonic. We invested over $2.5 billion in that factory in Nevada. That investment in Nevada, that investment in Newark, that's called foreign direct investment. That's when an international company commits resources or capital in another country to grow their business. Foreign direct investment, I don't know why, I know the Fed knows it, I know the banks know it, it's the greatest secret for growing your economy that you can imagine, but there's no relevance to it in the sense that states, particularly New Jersey, don't spend much time on it. But let me give you a few facts about international companies or foreign companies who are investing directly in the United States. 7.1 million U.S. workers are employed by international companies, 7.1 million. They earn 26% more than private sector averages. International companies have created 62% of all new manufacturing jobs in the United States in the last 5 years. International companies in the United States produce 25% of all U.S. exports. So they're not just building here to sell here, building here to export here. I had some more cool ones. Hold on a second. In New Jersey specifically, 284,000 workers are a result of foreign direct investment. 97,000 of those are in manufacturing. There's more than 1,000 international employers that operate in New Jersey. 8.6% of all jobs in New Jersey are supported by international investment. In the past 5 years in New Jersey, foreign direct employment is up 25%, while the private sector is up 7%. Those are huge numbers. The four top countries that invest in the United States are not hard to guess. It's the UK, it's Canada, it's Japan, and it's Germany. And they've invested more than $2 trillion in the United States. And the final piece I want to say is foreign companies have invested $60 billion in R&D within the United States. That's almost 16% of the total R&D. So what does that mean? That means that when we look at global markets, yes, we have to look at China and Asia and Europe. Are they rising or falling? As we think about selling into those markets. At the same time, we have to think about what will that do for their investment in the United States. The United States now attracts about 25% of all global foreign direct investment. I think that's profoundly too low when you look at the factors that go into deciding where you invest your capital. The stability of the government, the infrastructure, the education. No one can compete with the United States, yet we're only getting 25%. Why is that? Well, it's the tax structure. Until the most recent corporate tax, the United States was the highest corporate tax rate of all the developed countries. That doesn't make any sense. Japan was lower than us. Japan's economy hasn't moved in 25 years, and they had a lower corporate tax structure. It's not a level playing field. So who's heard Buy America? Even the state of New Jersey's talked about a Buy America. Our president's talking about Buy America. What does that mean, Buy America? Other than agricultural products, name me a product that you can think of that every component in there came from the United States. And in fact, the United States isn't capable of making many 100% Buy America. Your phone, your computer, your car can't possibly be made with US-only product. Can't possibly. Textile industry, it's gone in the United States. So what does that mean, Buy America? If I'm an American and I hire Americans and I pay corporate taxes and I pay income taxes and I pay real estate taxes, shouldn't I be treated the same way? But that's not the standard that's being held. Two other main factors of that. International companies get different treatment, shall I say, in terms of policy. You've heard about, we've all heard about the border and who can come in and who can't come in. And I don't want to be political, but international companies need to be able to bring particularly technical people back and forth easily. It's called an H-1B visa. Now it's incredibly difficult to support your own company in order to get temporary technical people coming in and out. I know 60 Minutes did a thing. Anyhow, we'll skip 60 Minutes for the time being. Also, when an international company wants to buy a U.S. company, which is not a bad thing, there's a federal regulation called CFIUS, which means if there's any potential that this could be used against the United States in any way. I don't have any problem with the regulation, but it's just incredibly abused. I'm pretty sure Japan is a solid ally, since we don't even have an army, but that's another subject. And finally, not that it's a big deal to me, international companies are not allowed to organize PACs, political action committees. Even in a headquarters where 90% of our employees are American, they're not allowed to create a political action committee to support politicians that they like because it's a foreign-owned entity. So that's kind of a global perspective that I have coming from a Japanese company. Final piece I want to say, this is a great university. I also work with another great university called NJIT, so I'm vice chairman of the board of trustees there. I got involved there 25 years ago when we were building factories in the United States, and we couldn't find engineers. I couldn't find industrial, mechanical, electrical, chemical. Couldn't find engineers. And so I started working with them to see how could we encourage kids into STEM education. I don't know that we've made a lot of progress as a nation, but I can tell you that if you ask me the single most important thing as my recommendation out of this, other than for government, state and federal government to stop spending so much money, it's for corporations and universities to work more closely together. Universities need, I can tell you what my requirements for people will be 5 years from now, both technical and commercial. Universities need to understand those requirements and build programs around the needs of the people that are creating jobs. That's how kids will have jobs when they get out of school. A great example is we've I have visited the BMW facility in Germany. They have a local university there that they're literally connected with. And they, over years, the university has created very specific educational programs for their engineers and scientists and technicians for the BMW Corporation. Mercedes has the same thing, Audi has the same thing. And the universities are not expected to do that for free, so take a sigh of relief. The corporations fund these to a very large extent. And they're similar to a co-op program. They tend to take 5 years or 6 years, but the kids are being paid while they're working, and they have a job when they get out, and they know what the job is because they've been working through that job. But it's a pure collaboration. Yes, it satisfies exactly what BMW needs, but it also solves the job issue. These kids are trained for specific jobs. The same thing with trade schools. For some reason in the United States, the trades seem to be frowned on. In Europe, they're very highly regarded. But we need to find a way to close that 6 million job openings because, to me, some of that is because people don't want to work, and most of it is because people aren't trained for what they need to be done. So that's my story. I'm sticking to it.
When I was in the Senate, one of my more memorable phone calls was when we were doing a Buy America bill, that the state government had to buy all their stuff from American companies. That was from Joe Taylor, the head of Panasonic. He wasn't too happy that day on that phone call. And I think if you see that Panasonic building in Newark, the skyline that it has added to, it was a huge force for good for New Jersey's biggest city. And United Airlines, Joe, I don't know if you've seen it, I think this month they have a feature on Newark. And it's pretty positive. I'm not sure what would have happened otherwise. So listen, let's take some questions. We had 4 long talks up here, a little longer than maybe we had promised you. But questions from the audience. Who wants to lead off? Anybody have something that's on their minds? Anybody? Did we lose some kids along the way? Maybe it's class change time. There's one right there. Yes, sir. You're a student here, I assume.
Yeah.
Great.
Thank you. This one is for Mr. Tashiro, actually. So, looking forward, how significant of an impact will automation have on unemployment?
So that's an excellent question. So and it's a very timely question to ask. So we do a lot of study on this. As a matter of fact, our president Patrick Harker actually recently did research on this, and by his estimates, in the next 30 years or so, up to 50% nationwide, the jobs will be replaced by machines and AI. So that's it's a shocking number. However, we talked about automation cars, automated cars and such. I think during our lifetime, it's still, the technology isn't still up there to for humans to be completely replaced by machines, right? So one example that someone was recently talking about is the airline companies, right? So we've had autopilot in airplanes for a number of years. We still have pilots. So despite the fact that the technology is advancing very very rapidly, and in terms of automobiles, I think for the next decade or 2 decades or so, I think the technology will still be driver assisting, not driver replacement. With that said, I think we still, since you're a student, one of my research is to do research on labor market. So one piece I did was that I looked at every single job posting in this country. So we looked at about 50 million job postings that were posted online, and we looked at what are these jobs, what are these companies looking for, and specifically what skills are the most important. And if you think about what skills that you need and that you put on your CVs and resumes, you may think about Excel, you may think about Python, Java, whatever. But really, if you look at the top 10 required skills for the jobs that require a bachelor's degree or more, 8 out of 10 were actually soft skills. So number one on the list was communication skills. So more than 50% of all jobs in the United States that require a bachelor's degree or higher were communication skills. Number two, writing skills. Number three, they said it was general business etiquette. So it looks like, my point, to your question is that, as we think about automation and, computers, not taking over, but replacing and assisting our jobs, what we need to, think about is how can humans, do better than machines. I think as long as, we do business with other humans, there are always going to be some components that we can do, but the machines can't. And it looks like job descriptions are certainly showing that.
Joe, if I may just
Chris,
add to
Chris
that.
Maher.
So when you think about automation, I think there's a broader labor policy issue in the country about what do we do about the wealth gap, what do we do about making sure that we've got high-quality jobs. And we have to be very careful about good intentions having unintended consequences. And we have a lot of policies that are tending to make labor much more expensive, particularly here in New Jersey. So I'll just share a story. We've got a client, specialty glass manufacturer, in the part of the state that has the highest level of unemployment today. So January 1st, we have a new leave act, which, look, I applaud. We give a healthcare leave to our employees. However, in that particular shop, in a really depressed area, 20 people called out sick in January. Now, why 20? Because the first guy called out sick and realized he was going to get paid and told the second guy and so forth. So we're financing the purchase of a specialty equipment manufactured in Germany. It'll cost a couple $1 million, and all those jobs are going away. Because that manufacturer cannot have that kind of disruption to what they're trying to do. They're a global company. They export the specialty glass. So we've got to figure out how to encourage jobs and not have policies that, while well-intentioned, drive up the cost of labor and then result in fewer jobs, especially fewer higher wage jobs.
All right, we lost our student delegation for the next class. The bell rang, but we can take some more questions from the adults and the kids
you.
that are left. Yes, go ahead.
Do the panelists worry about a race to the bottom? New Jersey has higher taxes, so it has to cut it. Then Pennsylvania will do the same thing, and New York will do the same thing. Where does it stop?
If you look, I'm a banker, I worry about everything. So, I think you raise a really good point there that even in the incentives, I agree with Joe, you have to have those programs. But beyond that, you also have to have base policies that don't require giant incentive packages, right, where you're trying to advantage some and disadvantage others. So you have to do the right things where governments invest along with, and I would look at it that way, they're investing with private companies to change something like the city of Newark. But I'll give you one observation about our state. We have the state that has struggled the most with urban environments in the United States. So urban's been hot, right? It's like the one thing that's consistent across the country. All the cities are doing great. And Newark's done a little better, Camden's done a little better, but you're not seeing that in Trenton, you don't see that in Patterson, you don't see that in Atlantic City, you don't see that in a bunch of other places. So I think public policy has to be a little more enlightened, or it will wind up being a race to the bottom.
Good point. Yes, sir. Matt Dolly.
Thanks. Just a comment on that as well, because we study the commercial real estate market. You do see some of that growth in some of the other urban areas, like a Morristown or a Hoboken or Jersey City. I think Patterson's looking to do some redevelopment there as well. But was my question, was that New Jersey's largely looked at as just a suburban market, whereas most of the other major markets have that urban center. We really don't have a specific urban center, unless you want to consider Newark that, and certainly the Hudson waterfront has grown to that, but many people call that the sixth borough of New York. Do you still see the urban growth, or are we starting to see a little bit of a reverse back to the suburbs as some of the younger students get older, start to have family, et cetera, and going to sort of a quasi-urban area like a Morristown, a Summit, Westfield, those kind of areas?
We do a lot of residential lending around the state, and look, urban's still strong, generally speaking, although there are soft spots, right? So some of the, like the apartment market in Manhattan is not particularly strong right now, especially in the mid-range. We're seeing some out-migration where folks now, it seems like the delay to start a household creation is what drives home purchases. is a delay to start a family. But now the millennials are beginning to have families, and they realize that at places like Tribeca, where you've got, $25,000, $30,000 for a good preschool, right? If you have 2 kids, that's a big nut. Maybe they should come back and try the suburbs. But there's a distinct difference. If you track real estate values in our state and you plot them against transit hubs, you'll find that the folks that are moving back are highly sensitive to transit locations. So in those of you familiar with this geography, you would benefit in places like a Red Bank or Asbury Park or close to it, and not so much in places like Colts Neck that don't have transportation infrastructure, or Freehold, right, which is a bigger challenge. So they are moving back out. They're tending to have smaller homes, less maintenance and upkeep, and they want to be by a transit hub. And those things are doing pretty well.
Yeah, there's a lot of recreation or creation of urban places around train stations all around New Jersey. We got to figure out how we can do the same in our historic places like Elizabeth and Patterson and the like. Okay, who's next? Sir.
Actually, this is
We'll go to you next. Sorry. Okay, go ahead. Go right ahead.
this is for you, Chris. What's your opinion and experience with the green zones that are in New Jersey currently?
So by green zones, you're talking about the development restricted areas. Well, I have a personal experience I'll share. I lived in Morris County for a number of years in a town called Randolph. And it's unique in the state in that more than half of the public space in Randolph is permanently preserved, either county parks or they have the farm exemption. And I think it had a really great outcome. If you look to Europe, I saw an economist a number of years ago talked about the Europeanization of America, right? Becoming more urban, and less consumer-driven. I think that concentrating development in denser places is, it's a little more cost-efficient and effective and has good social outcomes. So I think the sprawl that was intended to kind of displace, I think it's done a good thing. But there's plenty of developable land. I will say this: we have developers we lend to. So anyone feel like it's really easy to buy an affordable house in New Jersey? No, right? So you might know this, that our developers will tell us that they are minimum $100,000 per unit to get the permits to put a shovel in the ground. So if it's going to take you 5 years and $100,000 to $200,000 a site, you cannot sell a $250,000 home. It's impossible. So when you do that, you're going to go to the upside. You're going to say, look, I've got to sell a $500,000, $600,000, $700,000 house. So there are policy implications there as well, where you say, I'm making it more expensive to build affordable housing. So.
Okay, now to you.
Mr. Taylor, I direct this question to you. I'm born and raised in Newark, so I applaud your company and your efforts in my home city. But is there a statistic available that depicts the amount of people that are working for Panasonic or working for Prudential, another big player in Newark, that actually live in the city?
Yeah, it's a good question. So Prudential, they have an advantage. They have a lot of what I'll call clerical positions. And so they have a very high percentage of Newark and surrounding Newark residents working there. We didn't anticipate the problem of finding, we don't have any clerical functions essentially. This is a headquarters function, so it's finance and it's marketing and it's engineering. So the best that we did, we have a program with NJIT, so we have a lot of interns, engineering type interns that we've hired, probably, but the number is not impressive. It's less than 100 since we moved in there 5 years ago. But that's been a big disappointment. How do we encourage more kids to come to Panasonic with technical degrees?
We're seeing some housing built there. Good point. Okay. Young student here, Middletown resident, I think.
So I have a question. So some people want the minimum wage to be raised. I know recently it was raised. This is for any of the panelists. Do you think the minimum wage being raised would be a good thing for the economy or a bad thing?
Sure, I can take this question. So,
Roy, you should take it. Joe Taylor should. We'll spare Chris.
So this is actually
He already raised his minimum wage to $15 like a year ago. I think that's correct. Am I right? Okay.
So just like any other debate, I think it's kind of a yes and no type question. So if you think about the overall impact of what the raising what does raising minimum wage do to the economy, the answer is actually not much at all, actually. So I don't know if you know these statistics, but of the all hourly paid Americans in this country, 4% are paid minimum wage right now, and around that time, around that figure. And hourly wage Americans make up for roughly half of our labor force. So if you look at the combined, if you look at the the entire labor force, people who get paid hourly, minimum wage are about 2%. So in terms of the overall economic impact, I think it's very tiny, to be honest. In that way, I don't think there is any. It's hard to believe in any sort of macroeconomic shock, positive or negative. So with that said, one mantra that we economists have is that policy should do no harm, right? So my take has always been that if it does do no harm, and if people are going to be happy getting paid more, and by the way, these 2%, majority of them, 80% of them were 20 years and younger. So basically, you guys. So if we can keep our young workers happy by not disrupting the economy, I say why not?
I will add, at risk of jumping into this, right? So,
I did try to spare you.
I know, the living wage issue is a real issue in the country, and the wealth gap is a very real issue. And when I hear this debate, I always go back to the way Warren Buffett looks at it. I think he's a brilliant guy. Right now, what we're trying to do when we push the minimum wage is to get to that issue by making private employers bear the cost of social issues like automation and job, around job creation. That's a bad spiral. And those of you, if you've been to a McDonald's 10 years ago and 2 years ago, you'll see that we are on track to make our own fries soon. And you order, and that's all about the cost of that labor makes those jobs go away. Buffett's approach, which I think is a novel one, is that there should be more government subsidy of wages, right? We don't tax income. We tax wages. The people who make a lot of income don't pay a lot of income tax. The people that work every day, that put their hours in, they pay a huge tax. So I think we should be looking at it more systemically and saying, we want that wage to come up, but I don't want to burden the small business guy in the corner to try and fix that social issue of automation. Let's try and do it in a more systemic way. So that said, we did go to a $15 an hour minimum wage a year ago. And we'll continue to index that up. So my company is supportive of it.
To Roya's point, it may not have an overarching effect to the big economy, but Chris is right to point out the effect on small businesses and on local governments. In the New Jersey bill, governments weren't initially involved, but at the last minute they were. So in your hometown, for example, Middletown, it's an extra $750,000 a year for the enhanced wages, so that will get passed on to the property taxpayer. So we want a minimum wage, but we got to recognize that a lot of folks are high school kids, college kids. Maybe there should be a training wage. How fast should the rise be? How do you soften the shock to the small business people and to government and the like? Okay, yes, sir. Kevin.
This is for Joe primarily, but the governor talks a lot about an innovation economy, how New Jersey needs to sort of be like California. And when you, as Monmouth County residents, we see what's happening at Bell Works with iSIMS growing like it has and WorkWave. It's exciting stuff. I just wonder if you think there's anything to it, and if the discussion turned into more concrete, hey, we need to attract more tech businesses, whatever the innovation economy is all about, how would you do it? And is there anything to that?
Yeah, actually, I'm only semi-retired because I'm involved with a couple of startups out on the West Coast, including a startup accelerator, and there really is something to it, and it's been a profound impact on California's economy. But saying we want to be an innovation center and we want to be a tech hub, saying it doesn't have any meaning whatsoever. I laugh when I say, oh, we're the innovation center. Yeah, we were when Edison was here, but we're not now. So what do you need to create an environment where people want to come? So the first thing is you need a place where kids want to come. Not just kids, I shouldn't say just kids, entrepreneurs that have this startup mentality. Where do they go? Where can we send them? How can we subsidize them? How can we fund them? How can we give them access not just to capital, but to other resources, advice, investors? So that whole infrastructure has to be created. And I don't see where it's going to be done. To be honest with you, it'll never work if it's done under government auspices. It just won't work. And I love NJIT, it's part of me. We have an innovation center, but I've told our president it won't work under academia either, because academia and government work at different paces than startups do, and they have different mentalities. So they could create space, perhaps. They could give advice, perhaps. They could fund if, well, state university, you may be able to fund, but a state university can't fund it. So I think there's real substance to it, and they're burgeoning on, it's not just the West Coast anymore. Boston is a huge hub, Salt Lake City, Atlanta. When I look over in Europe, for instance, East Berlin is a huge hub for startups. So you need a space and you need an infrastructure, but I think it has to be private. It can be encouraged by the government, but I think the government has to have hands off and maybe some kind of incentive for it. But personally, I think leave the government out of it. And how do we do this as a private entrepreneurship? Otherwise, I don't think it'll work.
Thank you. What else out there? Any other thoughts? We're getting a little late, 11:40. We can wrap it up. Any final comments, questions? Run right there. Yes, go ahead. We'll give one last shot at a question. If not, we'll wrap it up. Go ahead.
This question's for Mr. Taylor. Just like Professor Buzza said, I'm born and raised in Newark as well. So I was just wondering, what do you think was the main draw to Newark, being that like the economy was so bad and Newark was in the dumps at that time?
Well, it goes back to the riots in '66 and '67, and frankly, the city never recovered from there. And there's lots of people to blame, but doesn't matter how it got there. I think the pieces are in place now for it to come around. I really like the mayor. I really like the mayor. I have to be politically circumspect. And I think the city council is getting better and better. I think the mentality, I'll tell you something that I told the mayor shortly after he became mayor, maybe 1 year after he became the mayor, and I got to know Roz fairly well. He's a really good guy, and he means the best for the city. But the city kept coming and coming and coming, asking and asking and asking. And finally I said to the mayor, I said, you know, you can't milk the cow forever. Sometime you have to give the cow a break. And what I meant by that was, one of the problems, as I mentioned earlier, 55% of the employment in the city of Newark was for not-for-profits, which means they don't make any money, right? And that's an entirely different mentality. And you're not generating any taxes from a not-for-profit. So the pressure on the for-profit organizations is profound to begin with. And then, yes, there's a certain amount of money that we all set aside, not like Prudential, their foundation is just profound. But there's an amount of money that we set aside, try to do community things. But the city had come to rely on corporations with their hands out. And that's not sustainable, and it's not attractive for companies coming in. It's not an attractive thing. So I think they're getting better and better at that. I think they're doing a better job of showing companies and developers particularly. Have you been back in the city recently? All right, do you see all the buildings going up, not only in the city, but over in Harrison? A lot of that is going to be affordable housing primarily for teachers and students. And with those kinds of investments, then restaurants and bars and Whole Foods, and so it creates this whole ecosystem. But to answer your question, the problem started in the late 60s during the riots, and the city never recovered from that, and largely that was due to poor management, if I want to be blunt.
That's a great Newark commercial. One last thought from anybody for the good of the order or question? Well, thank you, everybody. I don't know if Assemblywoman Angelini was introduced, a great former Assemblywoman. The Mayor of Shrewsbury is here, and thank you. Mr. President, we had a lot of information today, a lot of great insight. here and there and in between, like the economy as a whole. We'll have to try to stitch it together and make good sense of it. So thank you to a great all-star panel, and good to be with all of you.
Hey, you're on the Hackensack board?